Sometimes the problem isn't the dog. Sometimes it's the life you thought you were bringing that dog into. Welcome to The Dog Who Asked for More, the podcast for dog parents navigating the messy, complicated parts of life with a dog. Here you'll gain confidence in your decisions, deepen your connection with your dog, and finally feel seen in something you've never been able to say out loud. When most people start looking for a dog, they research breeds. They look at photos, they watch videos, they imagine the hikes, the camping trips, the cuddles on the couch. And somewhere in that process, it's easy to start choosing a dog based on the life you hope you'll have, not the life you're living right now. The hard part is that our dogs don't move into our imaginations. They move into our homes, our routines, our schedules, our energy levels, our families. And when the fit isn't quite right, people often blame themselves or they blame the dog. But sometimes neither one is the problem. Sometimes it's just a mismatch. Today I'm talking with Julie Swan, the host of the Honest Dog Breeder podcast, about ethical breeding, green flags, red flags, and why finding the right dog matters so much more than finding the best dog. Julie, before we talk about breeders, what made you feel like this was a conversation people weren't having enough, breeders versus adopting?
My background is breeding hunting dogs. You don't go to the shelter to get a hunting dog. That doesn't really make sense. I didn't in the beginning run into this world where people were like, I can't believe you breed. Nobody questioned it because they had a purpose. It was very clear cut. But then when I started, I brought in rat terriers. And of course, there's a little bit different story. So you start to see this other thing. And then you go into other places where you're like, oh, yeah, I do good things. I breed healthy, tested dogs. I pay attention to what they're doing. They're like, how could you do that? And I'm like, I didn't feel like it was wrong. I'm helping people. I'm helping the dogs. So I started doing my research. And as I was looking into the adopt, don't shop movement, what I realized was there was this big misunderstanding. I love to just call it out. I don't mind rescues or shelter. I think there's a place for them. I think they're very helpful for many reasons. But what gets confused and what gets conflated is people say all dogs are worth loving, and we all agree on that. Nobody has ever questioned me on that. But that does not mean that every dog will be right for you. And so when you're looking at getting a dog that's going to fit seamlessly into your family and into your lifestyle and do the things you want to do, because the more that match works, the easier training becomes, the easier working with each other, the enjoyment is there, not the frustration. And when that works together, then the owners love the dog. And then they're able to give the dog the best quality of life because they're like, you're the best. I'm going to take you on every trip. I'm going to do this. We're going to go to the beach. You're coming. And that's what I found was the biggest difference. Shelters and rescues, I think, often skate over the fact that any dog will work for you. They just don't always detail it. They'll detail it like you're not good enough for this dog. I've seen that a fair amount, but they don't always look to find you the right match. And I think a good breeder is going to focus on that good match.
Let's focus on that for a minute. Do you remember a moment or a personal experience with a family that was trying to purchase from you where a dog wasn't the right match for that family?
Okay, I'm going to be straight and honest with you, right? That's my job. In the beginning, I had 3 litters in 4 weeks. I was not smart. Okay. So do what I say, not what I did. But I learned the hard way. So I sent home these beautiful hunting dogs. They were healthy. They were birdie. I mean, they were everything you want a hunting dog to be. And from that very first litter, I got 4 dogs back within a year. And I'm looking at these dogs and I'm like, they are exactly what a Sherman short hair is supposed to be. But then I looked at the buyers and I couldn't blame the buyers because they were good buyers too. They were good people. They were good owners. They were trying to do the right thing and it didn't work. And so I thought, these are good people. These are good dogs. What's wrong? And it was the match. It was 100% the match. They were not prepared for the kind of energy that my dogs had, what they needed. Because you gotta remember, my dogs are super healthy, but they're also super athletes. They can jump a 6-foot fence. People will be like, I got this great fence. And they're like walking on top of it. I remember this guy's like, they won't be able to get out of this. And he sold me some fencing. I sent him a picture a week later. Look at her walking on top of it. Anyways, I thought to myself, I have a problem and I need to change one of 2 things. I can either change my dogs to meet my buyers, or I can change and make my buyers meet my dogs. But either way, something has to change in order for this to fit. I really liked the buyers I was working with. So I ended up changing my dogs. I actually went with my next generation. I brought in a stud who was a little bit more people focused, a little calmer, a little slower metabolism. It just made an easier to manage dog. And so everybody started to have much better fit. And then I started to learn more about what the buyers needed. So that's a combination of really understanding their true expectations, but also understanding what they're getting into. My dogs are absolutely terrors from 6 months to a year. And people get them and they're like, they're so sweet. And then they get worse and worse and worse. And sometimes they're calling me, is it going to be like this forever? And I'm like, no, you just have to get through it. But they have to know that ahead of time. And so I'm just always in this process of making sure one, people are prepared, they know what to expect, they know how to get through it, they have the skills, but also that they want to. I've met some people who the last time they had a puppy was 15 years ago. Well, life looks different now. And sometimes they think they're in a place where they want a dog like this, but it's not always their life anymore, and that's okay. But it's my job as a breeder to make sure that they know what they're getting into so they can come at it with fully informed when they choose to get one.
No, I agree with you. I think the biggest problem is a lot of people choose a dog based on what they want their life to look like and not what their life actually looks
You
like.
nailed it.
And then when the dog gets there and it starts to act chaotic and crazy and they don't understand anything about the breed because they haven't done any research beyond what maybe Instagram shows them 2 or 3 years into this is what it looks to heck this breed of dog. And then that's when dogs start getting returned or dropped at shelters and all that stuff because they weren't expecting it. They weren't prepared for it. They wanted an aesthetic,
Yes.
not a breed. And there's a big difference there.
I agree. I had a heartbreaker. This guy worked with me for months. He had so many questions. We had 2-hour phone calls preparing him. He worked from home. He had a pool in his backyard. It was a great fit. Everything looked right. And he has the dog for 2 weeks. And he says, I'm so sorry. I just can't do this. I have to bring him back to you. And I was like, okay. And when he brought him back, he gave me his crate, his bed, his toys. He had 4 bags of food that he had pre stocked up. He was so prepared. And what broke my heart was that he thought he was the kind of person who would be active and do the things that my dogs do. And he became very aware that he was not that person. That's a painful thing to learn about yourself when you think you're one way and you're not. I would love for people to maybe understand that piece ahead of time. There's no problem if you're not a very active person. I'm doing good to get my 10 minutes of workout a day. Okay. Like that's it. I don't need a superstar. I have a big backyard for my dogs, by the way, too. I'm not individually exercising them. Yes.
No, I agree with you. There needs to not just be the research part of it, but the self reflection part. A friend of mine had an accidental litter because they rescued a dog off the side of a road. That dog got pregnant after she'd had to have her leg amputated. She'd been hit by a car. She was totally emaciated. They didn't want to spay her because they didn't think she would make it through both surgeries at the same time.
Sure.
So their other dog got her pregnant and she had 2 puppies. Now, what I didn't know when I agreed to accept this puppy was that, much like humans, trauma passes down through the womb. So, what do? I get a reactive dog. Now, I have years of experience in vet clinics. I have become a dog trainer because of him. And now I'm a canine nutritionist because of him. I put in extra layers of work that not everybody's going to be able to do. Not everybody's going to be able to just drop their entire life and focus what they're doing around this dog. And I think that that's something that people need to really, really understand when they go to a rescue is that whether or not that dog has had a good experience from
Mhm.
wherever it came from to the shelter or not, that doesn't mean that they're going to be reactive or not reactive because that transfer trauma from the mother through the womb can
Sure.
show up at any point in their life. If you go to a breeder, that's something that you're going to be having less of an issue. You have these dogs that are in controlled situations, controlled bloodlines, controlled breedings, and generally have a very stable lifestyle the whole time. It's not somebody who in their backyard decided to breed this dog and this dog, or an accidental, we rescued a dog off the side of the
Yeah.
road kind of situation like I had. So there's going to be history that you're not going to have access to
Right.
when you rescue that you have when you go to a breeder.
Oh, I agree. I agree. If I have a mom who doesn't do well with her puppies, like she's irritated with them, weaning is a little abrupt. So I remember the first time I was breeding, I was like, wow, that's a bit rough. But they growl at their puppies to say, hey, I'm done. And that's fine. That's normal. That's dog behavior. But some of them are exhausted. Some of them don't want to stay with their puppies. Some of them are just like, ugh, don't want to do this. And if that happens, I pull her from my program because of what you're talking about specifically, that it does pass forward. And so as much as I want to say that the dad and the mom, they matter the same, they don't. When you're picking breeding dogs, the female is more important. The male's genes and temperament's very genetic, but That's important. But her raising of them and her hormones and stress in utero will change puppies a lot.
I definitely think that that's something people don't know or don't talk about.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little bit now to the breeder side of it. When people start looking for a breeder, there's like this whole do your research, do your research, do your research. But I don't think anybody actually knows what that means. So, what do you think pet parents who are searching for a breeder pay
Mhm.
attention to that don't actually mean anything?
Health testing. Health testing is super important. The question would really be, do you pull your dogs that fail? What is your standard on hip dysplasia? You can still get fair when passing, which to me is not as ideal. It's still breedable, but I would say in certain breeds it's probably unacceptable. Health testing is just this blanket thing. I have a lot at 6 things that I have to test, but there are how many genes in our system? They're always looking at new stuff. And so, is the breeder tracking down the road what's happening with their dogs? I do want to know if your dog has a problem. I need to know. If your dog dies early, I need to know. And I'm not going to blame you, but I'm going to ask you a couple questions because I need to track. So, interestingly, I found out that my dogs have a shortened lifespan, one bloodline. If people are using oral flea and tick, they end up passing around 8 years old. Not always, but there's a higher probability with just one line of my dogs. I don't happen to have much of that line left, but it's just little things like that that I know. So, as a breeder, what I want you to do is I want you to find a breeder who is concerned about you, concerned about your life, concerned about finding you the right dog, and who will be honest with you. So, when you ask me a question about one of my dogs and you say, well, I want to do this, then I should ask you follow up questions. Okay, well, tell me more about that. Well, tell me how your kids are, or tell me about this so that I have more material to find you the right dog. Because I'll say a dog that tolerates a stay at home person who's in their office all day on the computer is a different dog than a dog that survives in a house that's going with 3 little kids under 8. These are different temperaments, different personalities, different energy levels. When you ask, what do you think of this breeding pair? The breeder should be able to give you both positive and negative traits. I don't expect them to trash their dogs, but they should sort of allude to, well, we love this about her. We brought in the stud to fix this or to enhance this or make this better. There should be a conversation where you know they've thought about it, where I try to separate the difference between an honest breeder and a backyard breeder. Is that a backyard breeder breeds more out of convenience? They're not necessarily intentionally trying to be wrong. They just don't usually have the intentionality behind their decisions that I would want them to have. So, for example, we use the stud down the street. So maybe he's not the right stud for you. Maybe he wasn't health tested. Maybe you didn't have this background. Maybe you haven't looked at him and his temperament. So I want to see all those things first. So when you're talking to a breeder, asking them about their dogs, where they thrive, where they struggle, and there should be a good conversation and they should want to match the dog to you.
Let's talk a little bit about the ethical breeding side of it.
Sure. Yeah.
Because when someone says ethical breeding,
It has a
what does
lot.
that actually mean? The health testing and the paperwork and the bloodlines and all. What does ethical breeding mean?
Yeah. So ethical breeding, it's kind of gray. That is the truth of it. What works for me with my dogs may not work for another breeder with their dogs. And it doesn't mean either of us are wrong. The best example that I can give you is all the dogs need to live in the home. There's no way I'm going to have all my dogs in my house at once. Multiple studs in my house would be just dog fights all the time. Studs are very territorial. You have a girl in heat. Now we're all fighting over it. It would be actually a bad choice on my part to put all my dogs in the house. They need to be in appropriate housing with appropriate shelter, with appropriate food and water and relief and places to go exercise and be themselves and have their drives met. But that's going to look different for every breed. It's going to look different for every breeder. And I think that's the part where people have this idea of what makes honest breeders or makes an ethical breeder. I can't take a livestock guardian dog who was bred in Switzerland to come here in my desert climate and say that he should be in my house. I brought my livestock guardian dog in my house one time. He thought the sky was falling in. He hated being in the house. He was afraid of it. So I was like, all right, you just live outside. He loved being outside. But could you imagine if I was like, here, 6-pound chihuahuas, please go outside. You'll be like hawk bait. So I can't do that. So what is appropriate for every breed is going to be different. What's appropriate in different climates is going to be different. What's appropriate for every breeder is going to be different. For example, 49% of adult dogs carry coccidia. Most dogs, once they're 6 months old, will have 0 symptoms, but it can get passed through milk, through the mom. So we can anticipate coccidia in puppies. Very, very common. If I were to have them running around my house, getting exposed to other things, that would be very unsafe. And that would be a poor way to raise my puppies. I have to create a place that's safe, sanitary, but then also gives them the enrichment and socialization they need. And again, that's going to look different for every breeder. The question is, when a breeder runs into an issue, what are they doing to support their decision making? What are they doing to back it up? So I would rather you not just say they check this box or they don't, but ask them the reasoning behind it. And if they can't give you a good reason, you can move on. That's okay.
Tell me something as an ethical breeder you want to know about the people taking your puppies home.
Yeah, I really want to know about how you want the dog to fit in your life. That's really what I want to know. I will tell you if my dogs aren't right for you. I'll just be honest with you. And I usually can lead you to that conclusion yourself. I remember I had a lady, she was freshly divorced, 1-year-old baby. And she's like, I just think a German short hair would be the perfect dog for us. I'm so excited. I just think it'd be great. We're active. And I'm like, I don't know how active a 1-year-old is. And I'm thinking, you're recently divorced. This just sounds like a nightmare because that baby is going to be the same height as the puppy. He's barely walking. The dog's gonna plow over your kid. So I just texted her. I said, hey, look, my dogs are like a lot. And I said, I'm sure you can do it, but would you want to? And I said, maybe this would be better when your son's 5. And I'll be honest with you, I never heard back from her again. I don't want you to be miserable with one of my dogs. I want you to be loving this dog.
And responsible, you are asking questions that make them think about, is this the right choice for me? Does this fit into my lifestyle?
Yeah.
Because the last thing as a breeder that you want is for 4 dogs to be returned to you in a year.
I think that's the biggest thing. My success is based on your success as an owner. If your dog is successful in your home for the life of that home and you say that was one of the best dogs I've ever had or the best dog I've ever had, that's success. But just placing my dogs in homes is not success. Anybody can do that.
Okay, so without turning this into a checklist of what you should do and shouldn't
Yeah.
do, let's talk about green flags and red flags when you're looking for a breeder.
Sure. You need to first clarify if the breed is right for you. I think that's the biggest one. A lot of times there's like quizzes online that people make that are like, what breed is right for me? And they only have like 12 answers at the end of those quizzes. And it's going to filter you into these 12 breeds. And you might not be a fit for any of them. Photos are helpful of what the dogs look like in their life. Photos that show the lifestyle. That helps me really see if they're going to have the right temperament maybe for your lifestyle. So for example, German Shorthair, if all they show you are dogs in field trials and you're like, I want to get this for my kids so we can go camping, probably not the right fit, right? And I would just be honest with them and say, I look to do this in my life with this dog. Do you think your dogs would be a good fit? I think that always opens a good conversation. And if the breeder says my dogs are good for anyone, go somewhere else because they don't understand enough. Sometimes it means they're new and sometimes they just are in a sell place. So red flags, if they can't tell you anything about what they do to raise the puppies, that's a red flag. If they don't have information about what to feed the dogs or what food they recommend or anything, to me, that's a bit of a red flag. I want a breeder who's done their research on the dog food. If they can't give you any information about what the puppies will turn out to be, now I know like with doodles, sometimes they don't always know, but they should be able to give you a range. And then they should be able to tell you where you'll have some struggles. What's the biggest struggle people run into? I think that's always a good question to ask breeders. What are the biggest things that people struggle with your dogs? For me, it's definitely puppy biting. When they can't explain their decision making, that's a red flag to me. There's a little bit of a cop out that breeders will have that's, oh, my mentor taught me this. I would consider that a red flag too. Not that they have a mentor, that's wonderful, but the good mentors are going to explain to you why we do it this way. And so I want you to have a breeder who has a good mentor. So those would be my red flags. And then they should be very interested in making sure they get you the right dog. Because even in a litter of mine, even as much as I've honed my lines after 5 generations, I still get a variation in a litter. And some dogs will not be a good fit for your home.
That's science. My sister and I are completely different. That's just something I think that people don't think about when they get
Right.
puppies. Like they're not all going to be the same. Dogs are unique individuals with their own thoughts, personalities, and feelings. And that's something that people need to take into account when they're thinking about getting a dog in their home. Let's talk very briefly about what it looks like when someone picks a dog that fits their lifestyle.
It's so much smoother. As a breeder, I know it's working because they're sending me pictures of, isn't she cute? Wasn't this great? And they are telling me little stories. And I love getting them. That's how you know it's working. When all those little moments with your dog are like perfect.
Before we wrap up, I want to pause for something I call answering the ask. This is a moment where we shift out of trying to fix things and into understanding what's actually going on. Because a lot of the time, the hardest part isn't doing more, it's realizing what might be missing. Can you walk me into a moment where someone thought they had a dog problem, but what they were really dealing with was a mismatch between the dog they brought home and the life they were trying to live, and what changed once they understood that.
GSPs. I have a lot of people call me and they think, oh, the dog just needs to run all the time. And I'm like, no, they really need enrichment. They really need something to occupy and engage their brain. And it was just understanding that difference. And so having tools in place when they said, oh my gosh, this dog is driving me crazy. They're couch surfing and doing loops in my living room and we don't know what to do. Our dogs can get overtired. And so a lot of times I find the buyer thinks the dog is wrong or having major problems or that they're like the puppy biting. I get this dog is so aggressive. I'm like, it's just a puppy. It's just, its teeth are really uncomfortable right now. And then when they realize the dog is not trying to dominate them and not trying to make their life miserable. And if they could just see the perspective, the dog has these drives that are sort of like this reset list every single day that you have to hit. And you want a life that hits those things naturally. That's the goal. Once they realize, oh, it needs this, then everything just kind of comes together. Your dog actually needs a timeout. They're like overtired toddler right now. Just go put them in a crate with a bone. Just come back later. So many people position the dog like they're in opposition. And I'm like, they're like not that smart. I love them, but they don't have that agenda. They're not trying to manipulate you. They just want what they want.
I love that you said that about biting too, because I want to take that back to the human side of it for a second. Because immediately, the second a dog is teething and chewing things up or destroying things in the home or biting
Yeah.
the owner, they're aggressive, they're destructive. But if you have a baby that's teething and they're chewing on you and they're ruining toys and they're eating up bottle nipples, we don't call the children aggressive. We know that they're teething. So it really isn't that far of a stretch to apply that same thing
Yeah.
to a dog. People get really offended when you start comparing dogs to children and motherhood and all that kind of stuff. But really, the similarities are very, very, very much there. And if we could look at it through a different lens, I really
Mhm.
think that it would help a lot of people with their
Yeah.
frustrations.
Oh, I think so too. I think being a better leader for your dog is really the answer. I think that's always the thing. We have the capacity to understand them at a level that they could never understand us. So it's our job to be the translator. It's our job to understand them. And I will say a good breeder will support you. I don't think the breeder should fix all your problems. That's your dog. But they should give you some tips or at least send you to the right YouTube or maybe your podcast, just things to help people understand more of what's happening because it just takes the pressure off when we can discharge the emotion that goes with it and just say, okay, what's the problem at hand? Let's fix it.
Absolutely. If somebody listening to this is thinking about adding a dog to their family or
Yeah.
wondering if they're struggling because the fit isn't quite what they expected, what would you want them to sit with after this conversation?
I think if you're looking for a dog, just be realistic. I think we like to romanticize what we're going to get with our dog because one thing we know is like we're actually looking for a lifestyle when we get a dog. That dog is kind of a part of our identity in a way. People are always proud to say they have a border collie because they're so intelligent. I have a very smart dog. There's an identity that goes with it. Everything comes with like its own sort of story and identity piece. And I think we just want to be realistic about why that is an appealing thing to us. And is it in alignment with who we are right now? Or is it trying to be someone we haven't quite become yet? And I would rather you become that person first before you bring the dog into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is all about choosing the dog that is right for your lifestyles. Really love that you hit on that so hard today. Would you tell everyone how they can find you or connect with you?
I have a podcast. It is for dog breeders, so it could be super boring for you. But I do have the Honest Dog Breeder podcast with Julie Swan. You can find it pretty much anywhere. My videos are now on YouTube, so you can watch them as well. And we do have some interviews with experts and all those things. I love to focus on the buyer success, the puppy success, the breeding dog success, and of course, the breeder not being burned out in the process. And I made you a cheat sheet. It has all things I think you should think about before you talk to a breeder, some red flags that you should look for, and then green flags, and other questions you should ask yourself in the process.
Yep. And you guys will be able to find the link to Julie's document in the episode description. One thing I kept coming back to during this conversation was something that Julie said about success. Success isn't just bringing a puppy home. Success is looking at that dog years later and feeling like they truly fit into your life. Not because they were perfect, not because they never challenged you, but because the relationship works. And I think that's something a lot of people need to hear. Not every dog is right for every person. That doesn't make the dog bad, and it doesn't make the person wrong. It just means the fit matters. If this conversation has you thinking differently about the dog in front of you, whether you're bringing home a puppy, considering another dog, or trying to better understand the one you already have, the Dog Body Language Secrets Quiz can help you start seeing what your dog might be communicating beyond the behaviors themselves. You can find it linked in the show notes. So be kind, spread joy, And remember, the best dog isn't the one that looks good on paper. It's the one that fits the life you're actually living.